Chelsea Gray, right-handed layup, good. She got hit in the head. She'll get an and one, but hopefully Chelsea Gray will be okay.
The grand ballroom of the St. Regis in San Francisco gleamed under the light of crystal chandeliers, their facets scattering tiny rainbows across the polished marble floors as Caitlin Clark entered, her heart thudding in a rhythm that made every elegant footstep feel like a drumbeat of anticipation. She had been invited to the Children's Hope Foundation Gala, a gathering of the city's wealthiest elite, a glittering display of inherited fortunes, corporate influence, and philanthropic theater. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks prior, embossed with gold lettering on thick cream cardstock, whispering of old money and long-standing tradition. It was the sort of event where pledges of millions flowed with the same casual grace as champagne, where business deals were quietly sealed over 7-course dinners, and where the philanthropic ambitions of the young and idealistic were often scrutinized under the cold, calculating gaze of the wealthy. Caitlin, now more than just a college basketball sensation, felt the gravity of the evening pressing down on her, aware that her presence here signified more than social prestige. It symbolized her dedication to using her platform for children, for education, for opportunity. Her mind flicked briefly to the Caitlin Clark Foundation, the organization she had built from the ground up to provide nutrition, educational resources, and sports programs to underserved youth. And she silently vowed to remain vigilant, aware that these spaces, while glittering and ostensibly charitable, could conceal agendas far less noble. She had rehearsed her answers, prepared for questions about administrative costs, sustainability, and programmatic impact, yet nothing could prepare her for the sheer scale of wealth and expectation in the room. The valet handed over her keys, pausing just long enough to offer a word of encouragement, noting that his daughter followed her foundation's work. Caitlin felt a small anchor of comfort in that brief human connection before she stepped fully into the ballroom, where the atmosphere was almost dizzying in its opulence. Towering floral arrangements scented the air with jasmine and roses. Thousands of tiny lights twinkled overhead like captured stars, and silk-draped tables reflected the glow of candlelight, each setting meticulously arranged, each chair a symbol of social station and careful curation. Men moved in perfectly tailored tuxedos, women in gowns of silks and satins that must have cost more than most households earned in a year, all exuding a grace that was both polished and slightly intimidating. At the room's center stood Harrison Blackwell III, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, projecting the authority of generations of inherited wealth, his presence commanding immediate attention. Caitlin had researched him extensively. Heir to a tech fortune, chairman of multiple boards, and publicly lauded for charitable giving, he should have been an ally, yet there was a calculating edge to his gaze, a subtle scrutiny that made her feel as if she were being examined under a microscope. As she approached, he announced her arrival with theatrical flair. "Ah, our basketball star arrives." His voice carried over a tight circle of the city's elite, faces familiar from society pages, foundation boards, and corporate leadership. Their smiles were polite, distant, courteous masks that hinted they were unsure how someone of Caitlin's background fit into their curated world. She extended her hand, measured, confident, and said, "Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Blackwell. I'm honored to support the Children's Hope Foundation's work." His handshake was brief, firm, yet dismissive in its efficiency, his eyes scanning her as though evaluating the legitimacy of her intent. "Of course," he replied, his tone laced with polite curiosity. "Though I must admit, I'm intrigued by your foundation, quite ambitious for someone so new to philanthropy." Caitlin's pulse quickened. She anticipated the questions, the subtle challenges, and the condescension wrapped in genteel phrasing. As they conversed, Blackwell's inquiries became pointed, probing the foundation's funding, administrative overheads, and long-term sustainability with a skepticism that was almost palpable, as if he expected her answers to falter. Caitlin, however, remained steady, speaking to the tangible partnerships her foundation had cultivated with schools and community organizations, highlighting the measurable impact of her programs and demonstrating the thoughtfulness behind her decisions. Margaret Ashworth, a woman whose presence seemed as expensive as the jewelry she wore, offered her own pointed commentary. "It's refreshing to see young people getting involved. Though, of course, charity work is quite different from athletics. It requires a certain maturity of perspective." The smile she delivered was sharp beneath its social polish, a reminder that, in this environment, even well-intentioned actions were subject to scrutiny and subtle undermining. Caitlin felt the familiar fire that had driven her through packed arenas, but this was different. The stakes were moral and ethical rather than competitive. The evening progressed, and she was led to her seat among other emerging philanthropists, a designation that felt more like segregation than recognition, as the conversation at her table drifted toward yachts, country estates, and generational wealth. She contributed where she could, discussing impact and authenticity rather than social positioning or tax advantages, but increasingly sensed that her priorities spoke a different language than those around her. As dinner commenced, Harrison Blackwell took the stage, spotlight illuminating his commanding figure, a backdrop of familial achievement casting an almost theatrical shadow. He spoke polished words about philanthropy and innovation, carefully curated statistics of money raised, lives impacted, and projects completed. Yet, as Caitlin listened, she sensed a disconnect between rhetoric and reality, a suspicion that some narratives were carefully constructed for public consumption rather than actual benefit. She reflected on the core of her foundation's mission: transparency, direct impact, and the careful stewardship of every dollar entrusted to her. Caitlin understood that authentic change was measured not by appearances or applause, but by the tangible benefits reaching those who needed it most. Her thoughts were interrupted as children associated with the foundation took the stage for a performance, their voices small but resonant, sharing stories of transformation and hope. The room fell into an attentive silence, and for a brief moment, the contrast between genuine need and the curated world of wealth and power became stark. Caitlin watched their earnest eyes, the gravity of their experiences, and felt a renewed determination to ensure that her foundation's work remained untainted by the performative philanthropy surrounding her. These children, many of whom had faced systemic inequities, represented the reason for her dedication, the true measure of impact beyond gala lights and media coverage. In that moment, Caitlin recognized the power of authenticity, the strength inherent in small voices standing firmly in truth, and the responsibility she carried not just as an athlete, but as a steward of opportunity.
And adjusting to the height of your receiver, that is beautiful.
So wise. The double-digit lead down to 6.
The grand ballroom of the St. Regis in San Francisco sparkled under the light of countless crystal chandeliers, their prisms scattering rainbows across the polished marble floors, as Caitlin Clark stood quietly, feeling the weight of the hundreds of eyes upon her, all sharp with curiosity, some laced with condescension, and a few tinged with genuine interest. She had been invited to the Children's Hope Foundation Gala, a storied event renowned for drawing the city's wealthiest elites, the heirs of tech fortunes, and long-established dynasties whose philanthropy was as performative as it was substantial. Caitlin had prepared herself for scrutiny, aware that her youth and her status as a professional athlete might invite questions about her experience, her approach to charity, and the sustainability of her foundation's programs, which provided educational opportunities, nutritional support, and sports access to underserved children. The gala's host, Harrison Blackwell III, silver-haired and commanding, embodied the confidence of inherited wealth and influence, his gaze sweeping over Caitlin as he introduced the younger generation of philanthropists, pausing with a subtle, almost theatrical smirk before targeting her directly, his words dripping with a mix of humor and condescension. "Let's be honest," he said, his voice carrying across the room filled with meticulously polished guests. "When a basketball player barely out of college starts throwing around charity money, we all know what this really is: a publicity stunt to build a brand." The room fell into an expectant silence, the kind that makes time slow, and Caitlin felt her cheeks heat under the sudden attention, the sting of cynicism cutting deeper than any critic on the court ever had. She gripped the edge of her chair, mind racing between retreat and response, when, from the back of the room, a small but insistent voice pierced the tension. "That's not true," cried a girl no older than 10, her voice sharp with sincerity, echoing through the ballroom like a bell. One by one, more children emerged, their voices growing in courage and number, forming a chorus of gratitude and truth that filled the space with a force that no opulence, no carefully rehearsed speech, could counter. These were children from the communities Caitlin's foundation had touched, wearing everyday clothes, their earnest faces illuminated by both the chandeliers above and the authenticity of their experiences. "Miss Caitlin saved our whole school," one child shouted, and another added. "She came to our school when nobody else cared." A little girl with pigtails and resolute eyes declared that her brother now received breakfast every morning because of Caitlin's